Welcome to your first theory video inside the defensive systems course. Now, the first one is the most important, and it's all about the risk space rating. This is the most important concept in defensive IQ. It's going to underpin everything we do on defense, and it's also going to underpin everything that you learn later in this course. So it's super important that you understand this concept and that you get it right and get good at applying it. This is the mental tool we want to get really good at using whenever we are playing defense out on the ultimate Frisbee field. Super excited to jump into it. We've got a few examples at the end as well. But first, make sure you take notes, make sure you turn on the captions. You can also play this video on a faster speed if you need to, and make sure you finish the entire video because we have examples at the end that are going to hammer home exactly what the concept is about as well. So first of all, what is the risk space rating? The idea behind the risk space rating is that there are going to be situations, scenarios that occur on the field where certain areas of the field are high risk and certain other areas of the field are low risk. And so the idea is, as a defense, we want to get really good at identifying these scenarios and finding these opportunities where there are high risk spaces and low risk spaces. Now, what does a high risk space mean? A high risk space is a space that the offense can easily access or can easily attack or will want to attack. So what we want to get good at doing is be able to find these spaces that they want to attack. And as a defense, we want to be proactive in taking that away and stopping the offense from getting the disc there. So some essential terms to go through first of all. Firstly, high risk, low risk. Okay, where are the scenarios on the field that we see that are high risk versus where are the spaces on the field that we see are low risk? Second thing is risk factors. There are going to be certain variables that we're looking for that are going to inform us on whether a certain space is high risk or whether a certain space is low risk. Now, there are dozens and dozens of these variables, but to start, we're going to focus on three of them, which is number one, who the thrower is, number two, who the receiver is, and number three, where is the position of the disc on the field and where is the position of the receiver on the field. So the spacing and the positioning. Now, plus more, there's going to be more around the wind, the field state, the mark. All these variables are going to contribute to what risk spaces appear on the field, but these first three are going to make the biggest difference: thrower, receiver, and position. So we're going to go through some examples to walk you through how to identify these specific scenarios on the field. Next terminology is overplay and underplay. The idea here is when we have a high risk space, we always want to try and overplay that space. We want to get ready to contest that space, right? We might not necessarily always have to completely prevent it, but the idea is if we can overplay that space when it's high risk, it's going to help us increase the chance that we're going to be able to get a block, be ready to go and get a block. And the idea is when we have a low risk space, we want to underplay it, right? The idea is the disc is probably not going to go there. So if it does, if our cutter does start presenting in that direction, maybe we are going to underplay it and be less honest, be less close, be less bitey on that particular movement. The last terminology we want to get confident here in understanding is the idea of commitment or to commit. In this scenario, it's all about when there's a high risk scenario, when you're overplaying that high risk space. If the disc is coming up, if we can see that the disc is going to get there, if we can see that the offense is going to throw the disc, then we want to commit to that space so we can go ahead and get that block or create as much pressure in that high risk space as we can, because we have confidence that the disc is going to be released in that space. So now that you know what the risk space rating is, now you know everything about high risk, low risk, and now you know what overplay, underplay means and when we're looking to commit. Now I want to take you through 5 examples to hammer home this particular concept. And the idea is after you understand these 5 examples, these 5 scenarios, hopefully you'll get a better understanding of how this concept can apply in your gameplay and how you can start looking for these scenarios on the field. In our first scenario, we're going to be going through this situation out of a horizontal stack. Now, I want you guys to pay attention to exactly what happens between these two players in this play. And I want you guys to think about this in respect to our 3 key risk factors that we talked about. So that is who the thrower is, who the receiver is, and where are they positioned on the field. So first I'm going to roll play. I'm going to hit play, and I just want you guys to see exactly what happens and focus on these two players in the middle of the field here. In a second, we're going to rewind it and unpack exactly how this breaks down. Cool. Huge layout block. So let's hit rewind and let's see what actually happens. So first of all, a deep cut doesn't get thrown to immediately. In this scenario now, what we should be thinking about is the three factors, right? Who's the thrower? Who's the receiver? And where are they positioned on the field? You can see we're at a point here where the offensive cutter is now quite far away from where the thrower is. Okay, we know that the initial huck hasn't gone up. So in this scenario, we found a scenario where there's a high risk space on the field and a low risk space on the field. Have a guess on where the high risk space is. Now that we have the thrower quite far away from the cutter, it's unlikely that they're going to be able to turn and immediately throw the full length of the field. Okay, so that's the first factor, our thrower. Second thing is receiver, right? We can see that now they're turning, changing direction. You can also see that in this scenario, the receiver is shorter than our defender. Okay, so the offensive cutter is shorter than us. So in this scenario, we're not as worried about the deep huck going up because we feel that we've got a good chance. So because of these three factors, the thrower, the receiver, and the position being very deep and very far away from the thrower, we can make an informed decision, and we've identified that the under space here is going to be a high risk space. The end zone, okay, the space to the right over here, is going to be a low risk space. We're not worried about it. So with this being a high risk space, what can we do? Well, we want to overplay it, right? We want to overplay the under in this scenario, and we want to underplay the huck. In this scenario, this player overplays the under, and they're able to accelerate, they're able to commit, again, the terminology that we're using here. They commit early to the under, and they know all they need to do is accelerate and to get the block. Because it's unlikely that they're going to change direction and go deep. So that's our first example. We're going to go through 4 more that use similar variables in our decision making, but are a little bit different as well. In our next example, a few other variables at play, right? The disc is on the sideline. Our cutter is again initiating from quite deep. And in this specific scenario, there is some wind that the players are dealing with as well, coming from left to right. So the offense is going upwind. So we have these factors in mind. The wind is playing an impact as well. And we can see that because the position of our cutter is quite deep in this wind, we know that probably the under is going to remain high risk, this little channel here, right? The defense also knows that this space on the opposite side of the field is probably low risk. And so what they can do is get ready to commit and to accelerate and to overplay when our cutter attacks the high risk space. So I'm going to hit play. We're going to have a look at how this defender adjusts. They know that as soon as the cutter attacks the under, that they can overplay and that they can commit. Okay, we'll play that one more time. You can see initially they make an adjustment in their position, but they know that once they've baited the offensive cutter to go under, they know that's high risk. They know they can accelerate. They know for confidence that they can commit to that space on defense and go ahead and get that block. Cool. Start thinking about how these scenarios manufacture on the field, right? Start thinking about how these variables and what variables are coming into play here, right? The thrower, the receiver, but also the position of the disc, and also these other variables, including the wind, etc. Right? We're going to go through a few last examples to just hammer this message home. Here we have a slightly different scenario. Here we actually have a risk space that is changing, that is dynamic. And that's often a scenario that we find ourselves in a game. The risk spaces aren't always going to stay the same. They're going to change depending on the position of the disc and depending on what's happening on the field. Here we have the disc on the left side of the field. Now, what does that mean? It means that the risk space right now is towards this left half of the end zone. And you can see the defenders are very diligent in taking away this break side position of our offensive cutters. Now, what happens in this scenario is that the risk space actually changes. In a second, you're going to see this pass get let out towards this handler, and all of a sudden, the risk space is going to change. What's going to happen? Well, because the disc is closer towards the middle of the field, towards the open side, the risk space is going to change from the left side of the field towards the right side of the field. And so I want you guys to see what happens as this risk space changes. We can see this throw gets let out. And as this risk space changes, as a defense, we can start to overplay this new risk space, this open side. So we might have started on the break side because that's where we were set up according to a prior risk space. But now the disc has swung, all of a sudden the open side becomes extremely high risk. And so what can we do when there's a high risk space on the field? We can overplay it. We can commit to it. Okay. And so you'll see this in this scenario. The Japanese player on the right side of our field has a bit of separation going to the right. It means that because this is a high risk space, it's likely that it's going to get thrown. So you can see we're in a scenario where the defender is able to commit to that space, overplay that space, and go for the block. So we'll play that one more time. Everyone starts on the break side because that's the high risk space. The disc swings, risk space changes, and as a defense, we need to be ready to adjust so that we can overplay that new space, commit, and go and get that block. Moving on to the next example. Here is an example where now the break side is a risk. Okay, so what's happening is the disc swings towards the break side. This is also an example where we can start using risk spaces to consider how we can be an effective poach defender as well. So because the disc swings, we can see that the risk space has changed. The risk space has changed from going open side to this space in front of the disc towards the break side. Okay. Now, what you'll notice is we see a big streaking cut coming right to left across the field. Now, funnily enough, I've made a cameo in this clip. I'm actually right in the middle playing defense on another player down the field. Now, what am I paying attention to? Three key factors that we're thinking about. The thrower, the receiver, and the position of the disc. Okay? So, fun fact, this player here, his name is Eric Deng. He's actually one of the best throwers in Australia. And so I know in my head, okay, thought bubble, that he's one of the best. I know that he wants to take on a breakthrough. I know that he's in a scenario where he's really looking to try and attack this space on the field. What else am I looking at? I'm looking at the receiver. Okay, I can see that there's a player here. His name is James. He's also a World Games player, and I can see that he's attacking this break side space. I can also see that he's got quite a bit of separation from his player. And so in this scenario, based on those three factors, based on the position, with this being the new risk, based on the thrower, based on the receiver, I know as a defender on someone else that this is super high risk. Okay, high risk space in front of the disc on this break side. And so even though this is on the break side, I take an opportunity as a defender, as a poach defender, to try and look for this poach block. So you can see in a second, I'm able to at least contest and put in a bid to try and get that block in that scenario. Now, it doesn't eventuate, but it is a close chance. And Eric Deng here, I'm pretty confident that he's throwing this scenario or throwing this throw without seeing me there, right? The idea is I'm able to take a calculated chance based on the variables that I'm seeing on the field. And it's just fingertips away. Last example, we're going to go through a scenario where we have a deep cut happening. And so we're playing off a turnover. I'm playing defense in yellow over here. Okay. And what I'm noticing is three things, right? The thrower, the receiver, and the position. We're going to go in reverse order. We can see that position wise, the cutter is starting from quite shallow. They're close. Okay. And so what does that tell me? Well, it tells me that if they continue accelerating, the end zone becomes high risk. The end zone is high risk in this scenario. Second thing, who's the receiver? This receiver, his name's Sasha. He's known as being a good receiver type. Okay. I'm a shorter defender, 5'6", 5'7". Okay. So I know that more often than not, a thrower is probably wanting to put this out, even if it's 50-50. So in this scenario, based on those three variables, the position being short, the receiver being a strong receiver, and the thrower being on this break side, having an opportunity where the mark's not set, being able to throw this option on the backhand, I know that the end zone is extremely high risk, right? And so what does that mean? What's the terminology that we use? Well, it means that we can overplay this space and we can commit to this space. Okay, so you'll see very early on that before the throw has even gone, all right, you can see that I'm already accelerating as hard as I can because I'm essentially making an estimated guess that the disc is going to be thrown. And I really want you to pay attention to the effort that I'm putting in here, right? The disc hasn't been thrown yet, but as soon as this cut goes, I'm putting my head down, accelerating, looking for the disc, and then I'm able to come in and get that block. Okay. So even though I'm a shorter player, even though I'm matched up against a strong receiver, because of my understanding of risk spaces, I'm able to commit and overplay in such a way that allows me to get that block. So these are the variables that I want you guys to start thinking about. And these are just some examples of successful opportunities where you guys can use these risk spaces to get blocks in your game and to contest passes and to contest throws in a more tighter way throughout the points that you guys are playing. To summarize, we want to have a clear understanding of the risk space rating. We want to have a clear knowledge of when these scenarios occur on the field. We want to get really confident identifying high risk spaces and low risk spaces, and the way that we can identify that is through our understanding of risk factors. Can we quickly assess who the thrower is? Can we quickly assess who the receiver is? And can we make some sort of estimated guess based on the position of the disc? Are they starting shallow? Are they starting deep? What does that mean? Now, plus more, there's going to be other variables that are involved. Wind, we saw an example where wind made a difference as well. But these are just some key examples that I want you guys, key risk factors that I want you guys to start thinking about, especially in the scenarios that you guys are playing in over the next few weeks. From there, if we do identify a high risk space based on these factors, make sure that we're overplaying the high risk space, underplaying the low risk space, and make sure we're in a position to commit if the disc does go up and if they attack that space. Super good. I'll leave those examples inside the section below so that you can review them and watch them in your own time. But again, this is the core thesis, the core concept that we are building all our defensive theory upon. So really try and get confident in being able to identify these risk spaces on the field and being able to identify when there's a high risk space and a low risk space. Off the back of that, we're going to be going into our next theory in the very next video on the cutting life cycle. And we're going to use all the concepts that we've talked about here to inform our decision making in that very next section. Go ahead and mark this section as done. Complete the worksheet below as well, which I'll link, and make sure you move on to the next section on our cutting life cycle. All right, now that you've finished the risk-based rating, you've got an understanding of that. Now we're going to jump into the cutting life cycle. So what exactly is the cutting life cycle? The idea here is that there's a predictable sequence of events that cutters are going to go through whenever they decide to cut, whenever they're trying to get open. Now, how is this beneficial for us as a defense? Well, the idea is if we have an intimate understanding of what a cutter is trying to do, how they're trying to get open, it means that we can figure out ways to try and disrupt that. We can figure out ways to try take advantage at every point in their life cycle. So we're going to jump into it. We're going to go through a few examples at the end as well. But before we get started, make sure you first take notes along the way. Turn on captions so that it's a digestible way to get the information. Also, make sure you can play this on a faster speed if you need to. Bottom right, you can put it on 1.5 times speed or 2 times if you're feeling dangerous. From there, make sure you finish the entire video, and we have some examples at the end to help you understand the frameworks, understand exactly how it applies in a game scenario. Cool. The cutting life cycle. What is it? There's 4 stages, and these are the 4 stages that a cutter is always going to go through whenever they're trying to set up a cut and try and get open. These are the prep, the setup, the decision point, and the commitment. And we're going to go through a few examples to show you exactly what that looks like in a game. But before we go into that, first I want you to understand exactly what a cutter is trying to achieve at each of these stages in the cutting life cycle. So, all in all, they're trying to go through this sequence of 4 steps to try and get open, to try and get free from you, to try and get the disc. But it's not going to occur immediately. They're going to start setting up, they're going to start preparing first before they can actually commit to get to that stage. So, what do those steps look like? First, they're going to go through prep. Now, what is prep? Prep is the stage in the life cycle where they're trying to get to the best spot to initiate from, where they're trying to get to the right spot to be able to make the most threatening cut. So, for example, if the cutter is too deep, they might prep by coming a bit shorter and then initiating their cut from that point. If the disc is on the opposite side of the field, they might prep by closing that lateral distance, getting closer to the space in front of the disc, and then executing their cut. So prep is the stage where they're trying to get to the best spot to initiate from to try and get open. From there, they're going to move into the setup phase. The setup phase is where they start executing the cut itself. It's where they start to build momentum. Their goal is to try get you on the back foot, and they try fake you off so that you are lost and that they can commit to a space and actually get the disc. So the setup is where the cut actually starts. It's also where they are building momentum, trying to get you on your back foot so that they can get open. From there, they're going to move into a point in their cut where they're going to make a decision. So that's going to be our decision point. From there, they've made some sort of fake or they've made some sort of movement, and they've committed to a space. Are they going to that space to try and get the disc, or they're going to that space to try and clear out? Lastly, they go into the commitment phase. And this is the point where they think they're going to get the disc, or they know they're going to get the disc, so they're going to accelerate and try attack that space. So these are the 4 steps that every cutter is going to go through whenever they're trying to get the disc, whenever they're making a cut. And if we're able to understand this as a defense, then we can figure out ways to try to disrupt it. In the very next section, we're going to go through a few tools that we can use at each of these phases to try disrupt. But for now, we want to get really good at identifying what phase our cutters are in and be able to really clearly see which point that they're in inside their cutting life cycle when they're on the field. So to do that, we're going to go through a few examples. In this example, we have our structure being a horizontal stack. What happens first is that there's a big gainer in the middle of the field, and I want you to pay attention to Henry Ing, who's at the top of the screen, right above my head. You can see first the disc is towards the open side, and so what he's going to do in the context of the cutting life cycle is start by prepping. So what's prepping about? Remember, prepping is all about trying to get to the right spot. So here he's trying to close the distance, get closer towards the open side, and that's his prep complete. After prep, what's next? Then he's going to go into the setup. So now he's in the right spot. He's in the ideal position to try and attack the space. He's then going to set up and try get his defender moving in a certain direction, try get them on their back foot. So this is where he's going to start executing the cut. He's going to start completing that setup phase. and he's going to take 2 steps deep to fake the opponent and then decide to come under. Now he's done his decision point, he's committed to the under space, and now he's going to the commitment phase where he's able to come all the way in and go and get the disc. So you can see this all happening live. He sees the under, he's prepping, he's setting up, he's deciding, and then he's committing. Again, we want to get really good at being able to identify each of these steps, because in the very next section, we're going to talk about ways that we can disrupt it. In this example, we have a slightly different format. We've got a T stack, so 2 cutters isolated on the left. And you can see that we're going through the same motions, the same steps of the cutting life cycle. If you look at this cutter here on the right, they are prepping, so they're getting to the right spot. Then they're going to set up their cut. In this scenario, they do that by a simple jab step going deep. And then they go through the decision point and then they commit to the under. So very similar set of actions. Again, from this player, similar as well. They're prepping, getting to the right spot, setting up their cut. This time it's 2 jab steps, and then again, coming under to commit. Lastly, we'll go through an example with yours truly. I'm in this space on the very right, and we have the disc coming to the open side on the left side of the field. Here I notice that I'm at the back of the stack. I'm going to be the next one initiating. I notice that the disc is swinging to the open side, so I quickly have to prep. So I need to close the lateral distance. I'm going to go and set up my cut by taking those 2 steps deep. And then I'm going to decide and commit to that under space and accelerate. From here, hopefully you can see that every cut on the field is going to go through these exact 4 steps. They're going to go through some sort of prep where they're trying to get to the right spot. They're going to set up their cut, try and fake you, try and get open. And then they're going to make a decision, commit to a space, and try and get the disc. In the very next section, we're going to go through a few actionable tools that you guys can start applying at each of those steps inside the cutting life cycle to shut down your player and to get more blocks in those spaces. For now, go ahead and mark this section as done on the very top right. Fill out the worksheet below, and I'll see you in the very next page. All right, in this section, we're going to be going through how we can actually start disrupting the cutting life cycle. The idea is now we know exactly what cutters are consistently trying to do. We know they're trying to prep. We know they're trying to set up, decide, and then commit. We can now decide and figure out a series of tools that are going to help us disrupt a cutter at every stage inside that process. Now, before we jump into it, make sure you take notes along the way. Go ahead and turn on captions so that it's a bit easier to digest. And you can also play this video on a faster speed if you need to. Also, make sure you finish the entire video because we've got some examples at the end that make it a bit easier to understand. Now, before we jump into it, there's a few concepts that I want you guys to really understand in order to take advantage of these concepts. First of all, offense is a figured out game. We know that offense has a natural advantage in ultimate. And so if as a defense, we do what's typically just correct or we do what's right, it's not going to be enough to stagnate an offense and disrupt them. So the idea is we need to figure out a way to take an offense out of their plan A, to try and disrupt them, to make things difficult for them, and sometimes in a non-conventional way. I want you guys to understand this concept of a comfort rating. And so the idea is with an offense, and I'll see if I can draw this out. Imagine that an offense has this bar of comfort. And at the very top, this is their plan A. So they've got some sort of plan that they're trying to attack you with. So if you're fronting or if you're backing, then they're going to come up with some sort of plan to try and get open, do some sort of cut, and be able to go and get the disc where they want it. Now, the more that we can disrupt a cutter, the more that we can add a spanner in the works, create some sort of disruption, create a bit of chaos, it starts bringing this comfort rating down. Okay, so for every single thing that we can do to disrupt them and make their life more difficult, it's gonna make this bar of comfort go further and further down until we get to a point where we start getting the edge as a defense, right? They're no longer comfortable. They're no longer trying to approach the scenario with their plan A. Instead, they are forced to go to their plan B or their plan C or their plan D or their plan E. And so our goal as a defense is always to stack up these wins defensively to try and get them further and further away from their plan A and closer to our plan A. So the tools that we're going to use to get them there, we're going to go through right now. The idea here is that we're going to have a set of tools to disrupt exactly what they're trying to do at each stage inside the cutting life cycle. So it's super important that we have a strong understanding of the cutting life cycle before we jump into it. First of all, the prep. What are they trying to achieve? Well, they're trying to get to the right spot. Now, the one tool that I want you guys to start thinking about in this scenario is to absorb some sort of body contact during that prep phase. The idea is we don't want them just to be able to carve out all that space for free. We want to make it a little bit difficult for them in order to get to the right spot. And the way we're going to do that is by absorbing some sort of body contact. I want to take you guys through a particular example. We went through this a little bit earlier as well, but think about this cutter over here, initiating from the right side of the field. We know that they're wanting to get to this spot to initiate because the disc is all the way on that far side. So what we want to do as a defender is, instead of giving them this space for free, we want to try absorb that momentum, absorb that motion in some way so that they're at least slightly displaced from where they want to be. Maybe instead of initiating from the perfect spot where they are right now, instead they might be 2 meters across, right? And that little difference helps us get a little bit more of an edge when it comes to covering this option on defense. From there, we want to figure out some ways that we can disrupt the setup itself. So what is the offense trying to do? Well, they're trying to build momentum. They're trying to get us on the back foot. They're trying to make some sort of fake. So in this scenario, there's two main tools that we can use. Number one is our position. Can we keep some sort of buffer or some sort of orbit that's going to prevent them from getting towards a risk space? So after we've absorbed the momentum during the prep phase, then we need to quickly take a step to actually open up that buffer or open up that orbit, depending on where the offense is trying to attack. A huge, super important tool here is how we're using our footwork. Are we able to step back in a way so that we still have our weight forward? Are we able to keep our hips open in a way where we're able to react to where the offense is going to go? Now, this is just the introduction to some of these concepts, but throughout our essential activities and through the activities that we have inside the group, you'll learn some of the footwork that we need to actually shut down these options in the setup phase. As we move forward into the decision point, we know that this is the point in their cut where they're trying to commit to a space. This is also where we can use our knowledge from our risk space ratings to inform how we're going to commit or not commit to a space that the cutter is trying to attack. So the idea here is, if they're committing to a low risk space, if they end up cutting towards a low risk space, we don't want to bite on low risk. Instead, if they are moving towards a high risk space, we want to bite on high risk. We want to commit to high risk because the disc is likely going to go there. So that's how we can use the way that we understand risk spaces to our advantage at the decision point. And lastly, when an offense has decided to commit, when they got to a point where they're committing to a risk space, trying to get the disc, that's where we want to overplay that space, expect the disc to come, and commit to it defensively in the same way to go and get that block. Now, we've just gone through one example, but I want to take us through a few more examples to show some of these tools in action so that you guys can see how it might apply to your gameplay. Now, in this example, we're going to be going through a scenario where I'm marking a player at the 1 of the stack. And I want you to think about some of the tools that we discussed and see which ones are being applied here. Now, firstly, you can see that the disc is in the middle of the field. And now my player is starting to use their momentum to try and get closer towards the 1 of the stack. Firstly, I'm in this spot where I'm absorbing a little bit of that momentum. I'm not applying an immense amount of physicality, but I'm trying to establish some sort of touch to let them know that I'm there, to make it a little bit more uncomfortable for them to initiate on their cut. From there, as the disc swings, the risk space changes. Okay, so because now the disc is towards the open side, I want to now open up my positioning, open up my buffer, and create an orbit so that I can stop the open side as the highest risk. And so that's when I feel a bit more comfortable opening that up and creating a bit more of a gap between me and my player, knowing that the only risk is towards this open side. From there, the disc stays on the open side and my player eventually makes their way towards the back of the stack. And you can see now I've adjusted my positioning, adjusted my orbit to try and prevent the back of stack option, because that becomes the next highest risk. As this disc swings, I can see I quickly shift my position and shift my orbit again. And again, I'm here in a position where I'm absorbing the momentum because they're trying to get to a spot where they can take advantage of the disc moving. And we want to always be in a position to absorb some of that momentum when they're at that prep stage. Now, this is where things get a bit interesting. I jump back towards the open side, and we can see now my player is beginning to set up. Now they're at this setup phase where they're trying to make a cut and trying to get open and fake me out. Now, in this scenario, what I want to be focusing on is everything related to footwork. And we want to be using the footwork principles that we talk about inside the group. And we'll go through a few examples at the end of this video. But this is where I need to make sure my footwork is on point to be able to react, to be able to have my weight forward, and be able to flip my hips effectively to stop this next option. Now, in this scenario, they're able to get it towards the open side. I'm not able to quite make up that ground, but I'm able to push the disc at least wide and make the next option more difficult. In this next example, we have a stop disc scenario with the disc on the sideline. And I want you guys to pay attention to how the Japanese player plays at the very back of the stack. He can see that right now the offensive player has executed on that cut. They've made a decision, and then he's able to accelerate through, knowing that that's the space that the offense has committed to. So he is committing when the offense is committing. And we can break down this cut into those few life cycle steps. Right now, the prep is occurring. From here, he's going straight into a setup where he's making some sort of fake. And once we feel confident that they've completed that fake, when they've completed that setup phase and gone into the commitment phase, that's the point as a defense where we can feel confident accelerating and going for the block in this scenario. And you can see the defensive player almost baits it in that way here. They're able to start with some sort of under buffer. They flip it to bait the offense to try and attack under. They wait for them to commit. And once they've committed, they know that they can accelerate and commit equally as hard on defense to go and get that block. Here's one last example of how we're able to take advantage of some of the tools that we're going through to stop the cutting life cycle. In this particular example, we can see the reset is trying to attack this upline space or trying to get the disc back on the swing. Now, as a defender in this scenario, I know that this inside shot is high risk, but I also know that the mark is able to cover some of that space. And so my primary goal here is to try and prevent the easy swing coming back towards the middle. And so I'm going to treat the swing as high risk. And I know that if they try to squeeze this inside shot, that it's going to be a difficult throw. So what am I going to do here? I know that the cutter is going to initiate their cut. I know they're going to set up. And I know they're going to try and lose me on a fake. So this is where the footwork is super important to keep my hips open, to keep my weight forward so that I can react to those movements that the cutter is trying to make. So this cutter is going to take a few steps upfield. Again, I'm trying to keep my weight forward. I'm trying to keep my hips open, knowing that I want to prevent this risk space, knowing that I want to prevent the swing option as a priority. And the idea is once they've committed to the low risk space, I can simply just follow them out. Again, in these scenarios, there's a big emphasis on making sure that our footwork is right to be able to cover these options. We constantly want to go against what the offense is trying to do. We want to stop them from being able to get us on our back foot. We want to stop them from being able to fake us. And the only way that we can do that is through our footwork and through our positioning. That's when it's going to be really important for you guys to jump into the defensive footwork activities inside the classroom, because we've got activities inside that are specifically designed around helping you keep your weight forward so that you can react and contest the high risk options when they do come up. Now, I know what you're thinking, there's a lot there, but when it comes to implementing these tactics and implementing these tools inside your game, I really want you to take them one at a time. The really important piece here is that we understand the concept, we understand what a cutter is trying to do, and we understand the fact that we need to try and take them out of their plan A and get them closer to a point of discomfort when they're trying to set up for a cut. Now, when it comes to working on all of these steps, we're not going to try do them all at once. Try and pick one at a time that we can use as a focus during your gameplay sessions for the upcoming week. In a later video inside this course, we're going to go through specific tactics that you guys can use to make it easier to consolidate some of these frameworks and apply some of these frameworks into your game. But for the purpose of this video, just make sure that you have a strong knowledge base and a strong understanding of these concepts, of these tools documented inside your notes. From here, mark this section as done on the top right, complete the worksheet linked below, and I'll see you in the very next section.